It was a typical busy morning at the airport, the hum of people bustling through the terminals, the announcements echoing through the air, and the smell of fresh coffee lingering in the air. For most passengers, it was just another day, another flight. But for one woman, this was going to be a day that would change everything. Rachel was no stranger to travel. A successful entrepreneur, she had built a thriving business from the ground up, rising from humble beginnings to the top of her industry. She was used to success, used to the high-end lifestyle that came with it, but today, she wasn't there to flaunt her wealth. She was simply trying to get to a meeting, a quick business trip that would take her across the country. She stood in line at the check-in counter, her business attire sharp, her heels clicking confidently against the floor. She had been upgraded to first class several times before, and though she never expected special treatment, it was always nice when it happened. She approached the gate attendant, handed over her ticket, and smiled as the attendant scanned it. "You're in economy today," the attendant said, handing her the boarding pass without meeting her eyes. Rachel was taken aback. She looked at her ticket again, wondering if there had been some sort of mistake. She had booked her flight months in advance, and it was clear from the price she had paid that she should have been in first class. The attendant's response, though polite, was blunt, and there was no sign of any intention to resolve the issue. "Excuse me," Rachel said, keeping her tone even. "I believe I should be in first class. My booking was for an upgrade." The attendant glanced at the computer screen, then back at Rachel, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Sorry, ma'am. It seems there was a glitch in the system. We can't accommodate you in first class today." Rachel could feel the frustration bubbling up inside her, but she kept her composure. She was no stranger to adversity, and had learned to handle situations with grace. She took a deep breath and smiled, thinking perhaps there was some misunderstanding. "Is there a supervisor I can speak to?" The attendant looked her up and down, then nodded dismissively. "I'll get someone," she said, turning her back without another word. As Rachel waited for the supervisor, she noticed a small group of passengers nearby, overhearing the conversation. The whispers began almost immediately, some of them sneering at the situation. A couple of them exchanged knowing looks, clearly assuming that Rachel was just another entitled passenger trying to use her status to get something for free. When the supervisor finally arrived, a man in his mid-40s with a neatly trimmed beard and a formal uniform, he didn't offer much of an explanation. He simply repeated what the attendant had said, that the first-class seats were unavailable for her today. Rachel, though, wasn't the kind of woman to back down. "I've traveled extensively with this airline," she said, her voice firm. "And I've never been treated this way. I expect to be accommodated as I was originally booked." She was no longer asking, she was demanding. The supervisor hesitated for a moment, clearly sensing the tension. He didn't want to cause a scene, but it seemed he wasn't about to budge. "I understand your frustration, but there's nothing I can do at the moment." And then came the turning point. Rachel didn't raise her voice, didn't argue further. Instead, she reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and began typing something into it. The passengers nearby, who had been watching the scene unfold with growing interest, couldn't help but lean in, trying to catch a glimpse of what she was doing. One of them, a middle-aged man sitting with his family, muttered to his wife, "Typical. She probably thinks she's special just because she can afford first class." But Rachel wasn't typing a complaint or an angry message. No, she was preparing something entirely different. With a few taps, she sent a brief, professional email to the CEO of the airline. She didn't beg or demand special treatment. Instead, she wrote simply, "I was downgraded to economy despite my first-class reservation, and the service I've received has been nothing short of disappointing. I expect better. I hope to hear from you soon." She hit send. The supervisor looked at her, unimpressed. "I'm afraid you're going to have to board your flight in economy," he said again, clearly thinking he had won. But Rachel didn't get flustered. She smiled and stood tall. "I suppose so," she said, her tone calm and controlled. "I'll go, but I'll be expecting a resolution." The passengers who had been watching, including the man who had whispered to his wife earlier, exchanged surprised glances. They had expected Rachel to react with anger, to shout, or demand special treatment. Instead, she had kept her composure, and it was clear that she wasn't just an ordinary traveler. As Rachel walked toward the gate, the passengers continued to watch, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. But they couldn't shake the feeling that they had underestimated her. It wasn't until an hour later, just before the plane was set to take off, that the stewardess approached Rachel's seat in economy. "Excuse me, ma'am," the stewardess said, a polite smile on her face. "We've just received some instructions from the CEO's office. We have a first-class seat available for you. We apologize for the inconvenience." Rachel stood, her smile now warm and triumphant, and followed the stewardess to the front of the plane. As she passed the other passengers, their jaws dropped in disbelief. The middle-aged man, who had mocked her earlier, was now the one looking sheepish, his eyes wide as Rachel passed by. It didn't matter to Rachel. She had kept her cool, and in the end, her stunning response had left everyone in the terminal in shock. As she settled into her first-class seat, Rachel couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about the seat. It was about how she had handled the situation with grace, how she had turned the tables, and how she had shown everyone that no matter how they judged her, she was in control. The woman who had been dismissed and underestimated by the crowd had now made them all reconsider what it meant to be truly powerful. And as the plane took off, Rachel smiled, knowing this was just another reminder that sometimes, the best response is the one that shocks everyone.